So you're thinking about becoming a pilot and you want to know what's involved in getting your private pilot certificate. Well, you've come to the right place. Hi, my name is Mark Donovan, and I've been a flight instructor for over 5 years now, and I'm a CFI/CFII, and have successfully had students from private pilot status all the way up through CFI candidates get their pilot's license or pilot certificates with me. And I've instructed in everything from Cessna Skyhawks, Piper Warriors, Piper Archers, various tail draggers, and a few other Cessna products in between. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over the FAA requirements for getting your private pilot certificate, as well as my recommendations on the tools and resources and how you should go about working on getting your private pilot certificate so that you do it in the most efficient and cost-effective way. All right, I'm going to talk to you about how to get your private pilot certificate efficiently and affordably. If you have any questions regarding this presentation, feel free to reach out to me at the phone number or email address you see on this page. So first of all, what is required to obtain a private pilot certificate? You must be 16 years old to fly solo. So if you're a young person looking to fly, I encourage you to consider holding off to somewhere between 15 and a half years old before you actually get out there and start learning how to fly, because you have to be at least 16 years old to solo. You must be 17 years old and able to speak, read, and write English in order to obtain a private pilot certificate. You need to have in your possession a student pilot's license, which is a process going to the FAA's IACR website and filling out an application for free to get your student pilot's license. You need a medical. You need at least a Class 3 medical that you can find by talking to your local FBO where they provide flight instruction, and they can set you up or point you in the direction of an medical examiner to give a flight medical. You need a minimum of 40 hours of flight time with at least 20 hours with a CFI or certified flight instructor. You can anticipate, however, to spend between 55 to 65 hours to qualify for taking the practical exam for the private pilot certificate. That 40 hours by the FAA is the minimum, and from my experience, almost every person that comes to me is not eligible anywhere near 40 hours. And in 55 to 65 hours, it would be considered even moderate to some flight schools, particularly for flight schools that are operating out of controlled tower airports. Prior to soloing, you need to pass a pre-solo test administered by your CFI and graded. You also need to pass an aeronautical knowledge test for your check ride to become a private pilot. The test is not required for soloing. It's just the pre-solo test is required for soloing. And then finally, the last stage in getting your private pilot certificate is having an exam called the practical test with a designated pilot examiner from the FAA. The test is comprised of two phases: an oral knowledge test phase, which lasts between 1 to 1.5 hours. And then if that is successful, you'll actually go out in an aircraft, and the DP will have you do what they call a check ride flight, again lasting between an hour to hour and a half, worst case, where basically test you for all the maneuvers that you've been training with your instructor for the past several months. So minimum flight requirements for private pilot certificate, you need the 40 hours of flight time, and they must include 20 hours of flight instruction with an authorized instructor, a CFI or CFII. You need to have at least 3 hours of cross-country flight training in an airplane single-engine land aircraft, 3 hours of night flight training in an airplane single-engine land, involving 1 cross-country flight over 100 nautical miles in total distance, and you need a total of 10 takeoffs and 10 landings to a full stop at an airport as part of the night training. You also need 3 hours of flight training in a single-engine airplane on the control and maneuvering of airplanes solely by the reference to instruments, basic attitude instrument flying, as they call it. And then lastly, you need 3 hours of flight training with an authorized instructor in a single-engine airplane in preparation for the practical test, which must be done within 2 months of the test. Now, in addition to these basic requirements, there's inevitably more hours necessary to get you to that 20 or more that involve doing the various flight maneuvers that you're required to be tested for on your flight test. This would be things such as slow flight, power off stalls, power on stalls, steep turns, turns around a point, S-turns, other ground reference maneuvers, and various types of landings. So all that has to be done as well as part of your flight training. You're required to have 10 hours of solo flight training in an airplane single engine land in the area of operations of 61.107. Training must consist of at least 5 hours of cross-country solo time and an additional 5 hours of more solo cross-country or local solo cross-country. In addition to the 5 hours of solo cross-country time, one of those cross-country flights needs to be at least 150 nautical miles in total distance with a full stop landing at 3 points in one segment of the flight consisting of at least a straight line distance of at least 50 nautical miles between the takeoff and landing locations. Also, you need to have 3 takeoff and landings to a full stop, with each landing involving a flight in the traffic pattern at an airport with an operating control tower. Most efficient way to become a private pilot, ideally pass the written knowledge test first before you come to your FBO flight school. Now, this is more of a dream or fantasy from my perspective as a flight instructor. I wish all my students would do that, but the reality is 99% don't. I had one that did, and he was probably my shortest length of time student to get his license. I think he got it in about 43 hours. Now, he came to me with that written test done, his medical in place, and he had been sitting in the backseat of a Super Cub with his father, who had been a CFI. So he came to me well prepared. And since then, I've never had a student that prepared. If the knowledge test is not completed, at least you should be on your way to hitting the books early and being prepared as part of the flight instruction so that we can solo you relatively quickly. Normally, we're soloing in between 15 to 20 hours of flight time. The written knowledge test is done in an FAA-approved testing center and cost, at the time of this presentation, $175. You should have funds budgeted in advance for obtaining a private pilot license or certificate. Anticipate spending anywhere between $12 and $15K to get your certificate as of this presentation recording. You should plan to commit to fly 2 times a week or more. Complete the pre-solo test well in advance of being ready to solo, so that when your instructor feels that you're ready to solo, you can solo. If at all possible, stick with one CFI if you can. Every CFI that you fly with has to make sure that you're proficient in all maneuvers before endorsing you for solo flight and the practical exam. So if you switch CFIs multiple times, the new CFI that you switch to has to reconfirm that you're proficient in all those maneuvers before he or she will endorse you. So if you're hopping between instructors, you may find yourself spending a lot more money and time to get your license. Now, granted, there's times when it makes sense to switch. If there's personality issues, if there's logistic issues and timing and availability, by all means, make that switch, but do it sooner rather than later in your flight training. Materials to study for, the kind of 2 Bibles that you should think of when it comes to learning how to fly. One's the Airplane Flying Handbook. You can download it for free from the FAA's website, put it on your computer or your iPad, or you can purchase it online at Amazon or Sporties or other places. The other book is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. Again, you can download this from the FAA website, or you buy it online at Amazon or Sporties or any other aircraft or aviation website. I do recommend that you purchase an online private pilot ground school course. There's many players out there. Ones I have most experience with are Fly 8 Mike Alpha, Gold Seals and Sporties, and M0A. But there's a whole host of others here. I've got Gleim, Jeppesen, Angle of Attack, Ron Machado, and Finder Points. And there's several others. All of them are good. I've just, from my experience, the ones that I've been using with my students have been Fly 8 Mike Alpha and Sporties and Gold Seal. You can, when you purchase these online courses, you can do one-time purchases or monthly membership offerings. Depending on how fast you plan to take your private pilot certificate, one may be a better solution than the other. So you have to kind of judge that based on your plan in terms of how fast you want to get your training done. In regards to the private pilot training schedule, the overall flight ground training regime, again, aim to fly 2 to 3 times a week, with each flight lesson lasting about 1 to 1.5 hours. Plan for up to 1 to 2 hours of ground school with the flight instructor per week. Plan to independently study books and online course 3 to 5 hours per week. The Phase 1 initial flight training leading to solo flight. Normally this takes, again, 15 to 20 hours of flying with the instructor. The student will solo. When he does solo, typically will solo you with having you do 3 solo takeoff and landings in the pattern at the airport that you've been training at. Phase 2 is a cross-country flight training stage. This is followed by 2 or 3 solo cross-country flights after you've gone through the 3 hours of cross-country flight training. Again, you need a total of 3 hours of flight training with the instructor, and then the 5 hours minimum of solo cross-country required. And one of those cross-country flights needs to be at least that 150 nautical mile flight where you land at 3 different airports. What is a cross-country flight? It's defined as a flight that is at least 50 nautical miles in a straight line distance between the departure airport and the arrival airport. Again, you need a total of 10 hours of solo flight required, a combination of cross-country plus the local flying. Also during phase 2, night flying is introduced with the instructor, where you perform 10 takeoffs and landings at night, along with 1 cross-country flight with an instructor. You're required to have 3 hours, again, of that flight training with the instructor at night. Again, you'll have 3 hours of basic attitude flying, instrument flying. You fly solely by the instruments wearing foggles. This, again, requires 3 hours. The purpose here is not to make you an instrument pilot, but to allow you enough skills that if you inadvertently get yourself into clouds or a condition, that you can get yourself turned around and get yourself out of the clouds and keep the blue sky up. And then lastly, you need the 3 solo towered landings at a towered airport. And this all happens basically during phase 2. Phase 3 is the polishing up phase, if you will, in preparation for the practical exam. You need at least 3 hours of flight training just prior to the practical exam, or within 60 days of the practical exam, to go over all the required maneuvers and to perform them to the required tolerances. So items like steep turn, slow flight, power off stalls, power on stalls, ground reference maneuvers, short field, soft field, and normal takeoff and landings, all of those have to be mastered to the tolerance levels defined by the Private Pilot Airman Certificate standards. And so you learn all those types of maneuvers in phase 1 mainly, with continuing to improve on them in phase 2, but phase 3 is really just making sure they're polished, that you hit your tolerances for the check ride. And then finally, after the phase 3, you're ready for the practical exam with the FAA designated pilot examiner. Again, this involves about an hour and a half oral exam, followed by a flight that lasts another hour and a half with the examiner. So to summarize, most affordable path to a private pilot certificate: start studying early in your training and fly at least twice a week. Not hitting the books hard and early and not flying regularly enough during the training ends up costing you more in the end. And lastly, use your training flights to practice what you've learned on the ground. When in the plane, put into practice what you've already learned on the ground and sharpen your motor skills and muscle memory for controlling aircraft. So that's it in regards to the private pilot certificate requirements and the process for getting your private pilot's license, as well as my recommendations on how to do it cost effectively and efficiently. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or comment down below and I'll respond to those comments.